अभी the last.
Are you able to see the slides?
Kindly unmute yourself. Kindly unmute yourself and start, sir.
So
Yes,
first of all, I thank all of you for giving me this opportunity to give this lecture or a talk on deformed feet. It is mainly intended for the postgraduate students. And I would like to apologize for one more reason. That is mainly because the internet connection is very unstable here. Usually it was very stable till 1 hour back, but now there is some problem. Okay, let us see.
We don't hear you, sir.
Gopal sir, you have muted yourself.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes, sir. Now we can hear you, sir.
Okay, okay. So the human feet is a highly complex structure. It has 26 bones out of the total 206 in the human body. It has 33 joints, 100 ligaments, and 19 muscles and tendons. So the common presenting complaints in a foot problem are the pain, swelling, deformity, instability, gait abnormality, numbness, and paresthesia, and shoe wear, problems in shoe wear. So I think Dr. Jagdish have dealt with this examination of the feet. So I am concentrating on the deformity part only. But to revise what Jagdish has said, I have added a few slides. One, you need to examine the feet when the patient is walking, when the patient is standing, because the deformities will be better seen when the patient is weight bearing. You have to examine the foot when they are sitting, lying on the couch. Lower limbs should be exposed from the knees down, stand first facing the examiner and then with the back to the examiner. Always ask the patient to stand on the heel and stand on the tiptoe to see the integrity of the plantar flexors and dorsiflexors. In the pain, this is the usual complaint. Ask the patient regarding the site of the pain, the onset of pain, character of pain, duration of pain, aggravating and relieving factors, and associated symptoms. I will not go into the details because this has been dealt by Dr. Jagdish. This indicates the site of the pain, the causes of heel pain, the midfoot pain, and the forefoot pain. Now, coming to the deformity, the hindfoot deformities are usually equinus, calcaneus, varus, valgus, or a combination of these. Midfoot, you get the flat foot, the cavus foot, and the rocker bottom foot. Forefoot, you can get varus, valgus, and the plantaris, that is plantar flexion at the level of the midfoot. The toe deformities are common: hallux varus, hallux valgus, claw toes, hammer toes, mallet toe, and curly toes, or a combination of these deformities. So from this list, you can find that there are so many deformities uh, of the foot. And it is not possible for me to cover all these deformities in a span of 1 hour. So I will do only those which are important. In the history, you have to ask the age of the patient, the occupation, the participation in the sports activities, history of trauma, history of problems in the other joints, like as history of rheumatoid arthritis, diabetes, because Charcot's can produce deformities of the foot, peripheral neuropathies, and peripheral vascular disease. The first and the foremost in the examination of the deformed feet is the gait. Usually, we have got a heel-toe pattern of gait, that is heel strike, foot flat, mid flat, heel off, and toe off. So the stance phase is divided into three. That is from the heel strike to the foot flat. That is called as the first rocker. Then there is a progressive ankle dorsiflexion as the body passes over the stationary foot. That is the second rocker. and angle plantar flexion leading to toe off. So this is the third rocker. Why I am telling this is because the rockers of the foot are commonly asked for the DNB exam. The gait may be disturbed by pain, muscle weakness, deformity, or stiffness. Now, coming to the rockers of the foot, I have already said the first rocker begins with a heel strike. So, suppose there is a fixed equinus deformity, the first rocker will be absent. And suppose there is a weakness of dorsiflexors, when the heel strikes the ground, the foot goes down with a slap, as in the case of a foot drop. In the second rocker, the center of gravity, as you can see here, the center of gravity or the leg moves over a stationary angle. So it is going anteriorly, and the angle goes into relative dorsiflexion. This is important because if this stage of angle dorsiflexion is controlled by the eccentric contraction of the gastrosoleus muscle, mainly the soleus muscle. Suppose the soleus is weak, what is going to happen is the leg moves more anteriorly, and this leads to increased dorsiflexion of the ankle, leading on to the crouch gait. This is the mechanism of crouch when there is a over lengthening of the tendon Achilles. So the second rocker can be affected in crouch gait, and third, what is happening is the heel is going up during a heel off and toe off. So it produces an acceleration force and shifts the fulcrum to the metatarsal head prior to toe off. So if you divide these, the first rocker, the second rocker, and the third rocker, the first rocker duration is from the heel strike to the foot flap. Which muscles are involved? It is the anterior tibial muscles are mainly involved, mainly the tibialis anterior. What type of contraction? It is an eccentric contraction. Eccentric means it is a lengthening contraction. What is the action? It controls the plantar flexion of the foot and prevent the foot from slapping on the ground. Then second rocker, the foot flat to the mid stance. Posterior group of muscles, mainly the gastrosoleus. Again, it is an eccentric contraction. Posterior group contracts to control the forward rolling of the tibia over the ankle. I have shown in the previous slide. The third rocker is the mid stance to the toe off. It is the posterior group of muscles. This gives force to the push off. So it is a concentric contraction. It provides the forward propulsive force and shifts the fulcrum to the metatarsal head just prior to toe off. So these are the three rockers of the foot. If you just study these 2 or 3 slides, you will be able to write a 10-mark question. Various types of gait patterns are there in foot problems: antalgic gait, in-toeing, out-toeing, foot drop gait, equinus, calcaneus, and stiff gait. So many other types are also there. Now, how will you evaluate? Look at the foot alignment, the foot alignment, the footwear. Examination of the footwear is very, very important. In the flat foot, you find that it is the medial side that is worn easily. When there is a varus foot, it is the lateral side of the sole of the foot which is worn easily. Then look for callosities and cones that indicate undue pressure. There may be callosities at the head of the metatarsals. Then deformities, I have already mentioned these deformities, and look for swellings. So here, what you find is a cavus foot. So you can see increased arch of the foot with some clawing. Here, equinovarus feet. Here, it is an equinus feet. Here, what is happening is there is a planovalgus foot collapse. And here, there is a flat foot. You can see callosities under the metatarsal head. So these are some of the deformities, and it is these deformities which come as short cases for your exam. There may be a adolescent with a cavus feet. There may be a equinovarus feet. There may be a person walking with an equinus, pure equinus. There may be a planovalgus foot collapse, or there may be a flat foot, a rigid flat foot. These are all kept as short cases for your exam. Now, on palpation, you look for local rise of temperature, tenderness. You look for any swellings. You always look for whether the plantar fascia is tight or not. You don't forget to look for dorsalis pedis and posterior tibial pulsation. 1 in every normal people does not have a dorsalis pedis artery. Another interesting thing is dorsalis pedis may be absent in many cases of club foot. Likewise, posterior tibial artery may be absent in many cases of congenital vertical talus. Now, the ankle joint, subtalar, mid-tarsal, and toe movements should be looked for. And finally, the muscle power. It is important to look for the power of these muscles. So usually in the exam, the examiner will ask you, how will you look for tibialis anterior muscle strength? Unless you practice it every day in the ward, you will not be able to show the examiner how you are going to do it. So my advice to all the students is, whenever you see a case of foot deformity, look for the power of the muscles in the correct way. Tibialis posterior power, then gastrosolius power, the peroneal power, all these, unless you do it repeatedly, you will not be able to show it in the exam. The special test, there are several special tests described in the foot. I will deal with that when we come to individual problems. So the foot examination, as previously dealt by Dr. Jagdish, it is look, feel, move, measure, special stakes. Neurovascular status, always look for the proximal joints, the spine, and in the hand for intrinsic hand wasting. Because one problem is Charcot-Marie tooth disease, which may affect with as a cavus foot with claw toes. They will have intrinsic muscle wasting, which may be missed. Now, these are the deformities which I will try to cover today. The equinus, equinovarus, metatarsus varus and skew foot, calcaneus deformity, cavus, flat foot, and rocker bottom feet. Since there are about 100 slides, I request Gopal to stop me whenever it is time. I am willing to stop and continue in some other day.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
So equinus is a fixed plantar flexion deformity of the ankle. But there is a dynamic equinus. What is this dynamic equinus? The ankle remains in equinus while the child is walking, but can be passively brought to neutral or even into dorsiflexion. The child is recunted. So you can see this small child walking. See, he is walking with an equinus. But as soon as you put this child on the bed, the equinus disappears. This is what is called as the habitual toe walking. A similar phenomenon can be seen in spastic equinus of cerebral palsy also. So, even though we call equinus as a fixed plantar flexion deformity, you should understand that there is a dynamic equinus also. In the exam, it is often asked what is the difference between equinus and foot drop. The foot drop, when they are walking, the foot when they raise the foot off the ground, the foot goes into plantar flexion. In equinus, even when they are walking, it remains in equinus. Both static and dynamic, it is in equinus. What are the causes of equinus? The common thing that we get is club foot, that is congenital. Then you get multiple congenital contractures, arthrogryposis, congenital vertical talus, fibula hemimelia, and so many other congenital conditions can lead to equinus. Postural club foot, or a comatose child, or failure of the muscle to grow due to muscle fibrosis, as in Volkmann's ischemic contracture, post-traumatic fibrosis, intramuscular hemangioma, or Burns contraction. Or it may be a failure of the muscle to grow due to the lack of stress reflex, as in the case of lower motor neuron paralysis like spina bifida, poliomyelitis, peripheral nerve injuries, or upper motor neuron disease like cerebral palsy, or a primary muscle condition as Duchenne muscular dystrophy. So there are several causes of equinus. So you should know these causes when you evaluate a child with equinus. I have put it in a different way. It is these effects which you will have to look for when you examine the child. When the child walks, they walk with an equinus gait. So the normal heel-toe pattern of gait is abolished, and you have got a toe-toe pattern of gait. The toes are only touching the ground. What is its effect on the knee? When they walk on the toes, the fulcrum at the toes. From the fulcrum, the weight-bearing axis goes anterior to the knee. So therefore, there is a extension force on the knee. So this leads to a recurvatum deformity. Long-standing equinus, unless you correct it, will lead to hyperextension deformity of the knee. That is the effect of equinus on the knee. What is the effect on the ankle? So this is a one question that is commonly asked in the exam. What is the effect of a long-standing equinus at the ankle? You know, if you look at the anatomy of the talus, the anterior part of the talus is broader compared to the posterior part, the narrower posterior part. Therefore, when the angle is dorsiflex, it is the broad anterior part that comes into contact that engages the angle mortis. So the angle mortis becomes wider. When in an equinus deformity, what is happening? It is the narrow posterior part that is articulating there. This leads to reduced space in the angle mortis, or the ligaments becomes contracted. And when you are trying to correct it, you will not be able to correct it because of the narrowed angle mortis. So if you keep the angle immobilized in equinus, you will not be able to correct the deformity after some time because the angle mortis becomes narrower. What is the effect on the hind foot? In the hind foot, there is a term called valgus equina. So what is happening? Our tendency is made to make the foot plantigrade. There is some equinus there, and you are walking for years with that equinus. So the tendency of the foot is to make it plantigrade. So there is a joint in the foot which is called as the acetabulum pedis, that is between the talus and the navicula anteriorly. So there will be a lateral subluxation of this acetabulum pedis. This leads to a valgus deformity or a valgus collapse of the midfoot. So a compensatory mechanism that enables the heel to rest on the ground, even in the presence of an equinus deformity, is the development of a valgus deformity, or not the hind foot, it is the midfoot, hind and the midfoot. So the arch collapses and planovalgus deformity develops. This is mainly important in cases of cerebral palsy. In cerebral palsy, the patient will be walking with a crouch gait. And if you look at the foot, they usually will have a planovalgus deformity. This is because of a planovalgus foot collapse. But if you stabilize the subtalar joint, or if you correct the valgus at the subtalar joint, you find that there is an equinus deformity there. So in many of the, during crouch correction, in many cases, you may have to do something for the correction of equinus. Even though we theoretically tell that crouch, there will be increased dorsiflexion at the ankle. Of course, there is increased dorsiflexion, but if you take the foot as a whole, but that is happening in the midfoot, and the hind foot is still in equinus. So you just remember, students, you just remember that in long-standing equinus, there can be a subluxation occurring at the acetabulum pedis, or the talonavicular joint and the subtalar joint, producing an equinus of the midfoot and the hind foot. And this is called as the planovalgus foot collapse. What is the effect on the forefoot? So it produces splaying. So the foot becomes wide, the forefoot becomes wider. That can develop metatarsalgia, or in those cases where there is loss of sensation, it can produce ulceration, or it can produce callosities under the metatarsal head. So these are the problems that occur in the forefoot. What is the functional problem? They will have a difficulty in squatting because you need at least 20-degree dorsiflexion to sit on the floor or squat on the floor. So squatting becomes difficult. So these are the effects of equinus. So if you are getting a case of equinus, I have told you how to evaluate what are the things you should ask in the history, then look, feel, move. All these I have already said in the beginning, but these are the points. What does equinus cause to the knee? What does equinus cause to the ankle? What does it cause to the subtalar joint, what does it cause to the forefoot? Is the child able to scratch? These are the additional points which you will have to examine. It is not my intention to go through the treatment of all these conditions, but there are so many conditions described for ways of treating the equinus depending upon the severity. So I will not go into the details. One common thing that is asked is tendo-Achilles lengthening is a common procedure that is commonly done. So in some cases we do it in the coronal plane, and some cases you do it at the sagittal plane. So when will you do it in the coronal plane? So if there is a pure equinus without any varus or valgus, you do it at the coronal plane. Suppose there is associated varus or valgus deformity, you do it in the sagittal plane. That is, sagittal plane means in this plane you cut. Usually, the equinus is associated with varus. Therefore, the distal part you cut it medially, and the proximal part you cut it laterally. And then you make an Z, and then lengthen it and suture. Because tendo-Achilles is considered to be the most powerful inverter of the foot. It is more powerful because of its attachment onto the medial, more attached to the medial aspect. Therefore, it is more powerful than tibialis posterior for inverting the foot. To remove this inverter power, you do an isodosteotomy. You distal, you cut it medially. Suppose there is an equinovalgus, then you do it in the opposite manner. Okay. Then another, will you do a gastrocnemius recession or a gastrosoleus recession? What is the difference between these two? This is whether the gastrocnemius alone is affected by the contracture or the gastrocnemius and the soleus is affected by the contracture. This can be identified by the silver skiol test. So this is a common thing which we do in the evaluation of CP, and there are several other conditions where also it is very important. So in a diplegic CP, usually you get gastrocnemius alone involved, while in a hemiplegic CP, you get both gastrocnemius and soleus involved. We don't know the reason, but usually it is a gastrosoleus contracture in a hemiplegic CP and gastrocnemius contracture in a diplegic CP. So what is the difference between this gastrocnemius and gastrosoleus recession or lengthening? So you find that this is the gastrocnemius muscle. This paper is from Melbourne. They have done a lot of studies in that. And this is the gastrocnemius muscle. The gastrocnemius muscle becomes fascia here. And this fascia merges with the fascia of the soleus at approximately about 1 to 2 centimeters distal to the medial head of gastrocnemius. So here you have got the gastrocnemius fascia. Underneath that, you have got the soleus fascia. Underneath that, you have got the soleus muscles. You can see this muscle is the soleus. Suppose you want to lengthen the gastrocnemius alone, then you will have to do it at the first two levels. The first level is called as the Bowman's. The second is called the Strayer's, which is the commonest gastrocnemius recession that is done. And going down, you have got the fascia of gastrocnemius have already merged. So here what you are getting is a gastrocnemius plus soleus fascia and underneath the soleus muscle. Suppose you want to lengthen the gastrocnemius and soleus, then you will have to cut at this level. That is more than 1 finger breadth below the medial head of gastrocnemius. So at a lower level, if you cut it, you can cut the fascia alone. Underneath you have got the soleus muscle. Okay. So Volpius and Bakers are usually called as the gastrocnemius or gastrosoleus recession. Then you can do the tendo-Achilles, where you can lengthen both gastrocnemius and soleus. So this is another point which I want to tell regarding the correction of equinus. Now coming to equinovarus, the causes you all know is the clubfoot, injury to the peroneal nerve, the neuropathy causes of clubfoot. I think you know all these things. I will not go into the deep details. The clubfoot is a generic name that is given to any deformity in the lower limb where the foot looks like a club, like this. So there can be, this is the clubfoot. The club hand is a similar deformity where the hand looks like a club. So that is what is called as the club hand, which is seen in radial.
Sir, we cannot hear you, sir.
Hear
We are
you,
able
sir.
to hear.
Hear you.
We are
Yeah.
able to hear.
So the primary biological cause is the retracting fibrosis of the connective tissue. This retracting fibrosis is mainly seen in the posteromedial aspect of the ankle. Okay, that is the main pathology. This may be related to an abnormal myosin. The defect in the process lasts for around 4 years and then ceases. That is the reason why in Ponseti method of treatment, we need to continue the brace till around 4 years. Ponseti initially in his work used it only for the 1 year and the recurrence rate was very high. So he believes that this phenomenon that is seen, the retracting fibrosis that is seen, or the crimp that is seen in the posteromedial muscle, posteromedial soft tissues will remain till the age of 4. So relapse is possible during these 4 years. Based on the classification, you have got a postural clubfoot, idiopathic clubfoot, secondary clubfoot, and syndromic clubfoot. Okay, what is postural clubfoot? This is due to intrauterine position, and it is a mild flexible clubfoot, correctable in your hands. There is no equinus deformity, and the Pirani score is usually 0. In some cases, there may be some hindfoot equinus which may not be correctable, and for these cases, you may have to put 1 or 2 plaster cast. What is idiopathic CTV? Idiopathic CTV is not synonymous with clubfoot. Okay, idiopathic CTV is one condition where there is an isolated clubfoot in an otherwise normal child. So you have to look for the secondary causes of clubfoot before labeling a child as idiopathic CTV. The physical examination of the upper limb, spine, lower extremities, and neurological status, all these have to be assessed before labeling the child as idiopathic clubfoot. Calf atrophy is usually present in idiopathic clubfoot. Now coming to secondary clubfoot, one easy way to classify is neuropathic, as in the case of spina bifida, other neurological disorders, myopathic, as in the case of arthrogryposis, osteopathic, as in the case of tibial hemimelia, and syndromic, as there are several syndromes. I will not go into the details. The few common ones are the Streeter's or the constriction band syndrome, the Larson's, the whistling face, the Mobius syndrome, dystrophic dwarfism, and so many other conditions are there. So this is a family. I have got a few of these cases coming to our OP1. This is the whistling face syndrome. This is the congenital constriction band syndrome. Now a word regarding atypical clubfoot. This again can be asked in your viva or in the clinics. What is an atypical clubfoot? It is a severe clubfoot. Here the correction stops after 3 to 4 casts. The cast starts falling off. Some people believe that it is the cast that is becoming loose or the toes disappearing in the plaster that is responsible for the production of atypical clubfoot. So you have got a short foot with cocked up great toe. The foot is very small and there is a dorsiflexed great toe. There's a deep transverse crease on the plantar aspect. There's a deep crease on the plantar aspect. There is a plantaris deformity, as you see here in this CT. There's a plantaris deformity or a plantar flexion deformity of the first metatarsal. There is an apparent tibial bowing. See, there is an apparent tibial bowing. These are the characteristics of an atypical clubfoot. So severe clubfoot, where the correction stops after 3 to 4 casts, the cast starts falling off, short cocked up great toe, transverse crease, plantaris, that is forefoot plantar flexion, and apparent tibial bowing. In the history, what in the evaluation, in the history, you ask the parents regarding reduced fetal movement because it indicate arthrogryposis. Nowadays, prenatal ultrasound, you see the report of the prenatal ultrasound to see whether they have reported a clubfoot deformity there. As for the family history, there is a 2% chance of the first degree relatives having clubfoot. Look for, ask for the treatment history and slippage of POP during treatment that may indicate atypical clubfoot. In the general examination, many of these things are not necessary for you at the PG level, but you have to do a head to foot examination. Look for dysmorphic facies in the eyes. There may be abductor paralysis, as in the case of Mobius syndrome. In the ear, there may be a crumbled ear, which may be indicated dystrophic dysplasia. Spine, look for spina bifida, that is very important, and other neurocutaneous markers, especially in the midline, things like a tuft of hair, a lipoma, dimple, all these you have to look for. In the joints, you look for contracture of the joints, as in the case of arthrogryposis, or hypermobility of the joints, as in the case of Larsen syndrome. Then in the nail, some cases of nail patellar syndrome may be having clubfoot. So you look at the nails also. In the thumb, the classical feature is the hitchhiker's thumb that is seen in dystrophic dwarfism, the short stature and all the neurocutaneous markers, all these are important. But the message which I want to give is that if you are given a case of clubfoot, you have to identify whether it is primary, secondary, or syndrome. Okay, you don't need to look to find out the primary bone dysplasia that has produced this clubfoot. That is not important. But you have to say that it is due to a secondary clubfoot, probably due to arthrogryposis, because it is very resistant to treatment. You should not miss a case of neuropathy clubfoot due to a operated meningomyelocele. Okay. Now, examination of the foot, you all know the cavus adducted, the cave deformities, the cavus adductus varus and equinus. Then the deep medial crease and the posterior crease, concave medial border and the convex lateral border, the thinning of the calf and callosities on the lateral aspect in late cases. In a walking child, you may get callosities on the lateral aspect. Then along with that, you have to do a neurological examination. In an infant, the stroke test, that is stroking under the sole of the foot and look for dorsiflexion of the toes, is very important. In cases of neuropathic clubfoot, you will not get this movement. And in an older child, you have to do a proper neurological examination to exclude neurological causes. The severity is assessed by the Pirani score. I think you are all aware of the Pirani score, and it takes hardly 30 seconds to score it, and you repeatedly do it in the clinic, so that when you are asked to do it in the exam, you should be able to do this. As far as the treatment, I will not go into the treatment. It is the Ponseti method that has revolutionized the treatment. The other methods are the surgical treatment, the posteromedial release, and external fixators. I will not go into the details. Now, coming to the next deformity, that's the calcaneus deformity, which is just opposite that of an equinus deformity. So it can be the causes of a calcaneus, it can be congenital calcaneus deformity, congenital calcaneo valgus, which usually resolves by itself, or a congenital deformity due to a posteromedial bowing of the tibia. Okay. The second is acquired due to weakness of gastrosoleus muscle, excessive lengthening of the Achilles tendon, or contracture of the anterior compartment muscles. These are the causes of equinus. So what is a calcaneo valgus foot? It's a mild form, mild deformity that occurs in 30 to 40% of the newborns. When they are born, the parents are very much worried because the foot will be touching the dorsum of the leg. Dorsiflexion and eversion of the foot. The dorsum of the foot may be in contact with the shin. The deformity is usually resolved spontaneously by 3 to 6 months, regardless of treatment. In some cases, we give an anterior slab or a plaster of POP cast to get it corrected easily. Then congenital posteromedial bowing, this is again another condition. Here, there appears to be a lot of dorsiflexion. Actually, the dorsiflexion is taking place in the lower end of tibia, where there is an angulation here. It produces an apparent calcaneo valgus feet. The apex of the deformity is in the distal tibia, and Unlike here, it is in the distal tibia. Usually you can see here there is a posterior angulation here. These are usually innocent lesions, and they usually correct by itself to some extent during growth. And if they are not getting corrected, or if the two problems that are associated with these conditions are the valgus deformity of the ankle, and second is the shortening. If there is excessive shortening and or valgus deformity of the ankle, we do an osteotomy around the age of 4 to 5 years before the child is going to the school, and you can lengthen the bone and correct the deformity in a single sitting. What is the effect of calcaneus? There is abnormality in the gait again. The normal heel toe pattern is not there, and there will be loss of push off. And there will be a lot of thickening of the heel. If you have seen cases of calcaneus deformity, you find that the heel gets thickened. This is because of the friction, because every time the whole weight of the body is borne underneath the calcaneum, there is a lot of friction occurring there. Neuropathic ulceration can occur. If the quadriceps is not strong enough, what will happen? If there is a calcaneus deformity, the knee will buckle or will go into a crouch gait. Secondary cavus deformity can develop in an attempt to bring the foot down. As in the case of equinus, it has produced a planovalgus feet. Here, the calcaneus, you have to bring the foot down to make it plantigrade. Therefore, the forefoot goes into equinus. This leads to a cavus deformity. So as far as the treatment is concerned, it is difficult to manage. And these are the various methods of treatment that has been described. And most of these methods are not usually effective. So we have done peroneal translocation, we have done Peabody tendon transfers in small children, then calcaneal osteotomies, triple fusion, because these were done in the days of polio. Nowadays, we are not seeing many cases of calcaneus deformity. So at that time, we used to do this, but now for the past 20, 30 years, we are not doing any of these procedures. The next important deformity of the foot is the cavus. It is the elevation of the longitudinal arch of the foot. It does not reduce on weight bearing. So in the normal foot, if you pass the index finger under the sole, it should go up to the second toe. So if it is not going, if you are not able to pass it and the medial side is flat, you call it flat foot. If you are able to put the finger to the other side, then you call it a cavus foot. So cavus foot is increased arch, flat foot is flat arch, and rocker bottom foot is a opposite deformity, that is a convex deformity on the undersurface of the foot. These are the three deformities that occur on the sole of the foot. So it can be congenital, as it is called as pes arcuatus, the newborn child with a pes cavus. They are all asymptomatic, no muscle imbalance, and they do not progress. But it is the secondary that is more common. I think in one of the DNB exams, they have asked regarding the causes of cavus deformity. That is a classification and causes. So secondary, it is rare below 3 years of age. Most frequent etiology is neuromuscular. In more than 50 to 60% of cases, it is due to neuromuscular problems. Congenital clubfoot can produce cavus deformity. Compartment syndromes can produce cavus deformity. Fractures in the foot, especially calcaneum and tarsal bones, can lead to cavus deformity. And then there is an idiopathic condition which has been described called SCV, or the subtle cavovarus deformity of the foot. Now, since neuromuscular is the commonest cause, what are the conditions coming under that? It can be a cause in the brain, as in the case of cerebral palsy. You remember only one, cerebral palsy. Or it can be in the cerebrospinal tract, as in the case of Friedreich's ataxia. Or in the spinal cord, as in the case of poliomyelitis, or spinal dysraphism, or then spinal muscular atrophy, spinal cord tumors. You don't need to remember all these. You just remember one or two. Then in the anterior horn cell, it is a poliomyelitis. Peripheral nerve, it is the hereditary sensory motor neuropathy, or the Charcot-Marie Tooth, which is the most common condition. Or it can be due to traumatic lesions of the peripheral nerve, or neoplastic lesions of the peripheral nerve, and muscular dystrophy. So if you look at the causes, causes of cavus, you can remember from below upwards or above downwards. Below upwards, it can be a cause in the muscle dystrophy, can be a cause in the peripheral nerve, as in the case of hereditary sensory motor neuropathies or peripheral nerve injuries. Above that is the spinal cord, can be poliomyelitis, spinal muscular atrophy, motor neuron disease, then spinal dysraphism, or it can be in the tracts, as in the case of Friedreich's ataxia, or in the spine, in the brain, as in the case of cerebral palsy. So usually it is due to a muscle imbalance. The first metatarsal will drop, and the first metatarsal drop is one of the causes. Second is a calcaneus deformity, which we have already seen. When there is a calcaneus deformity, the tendency is to make the foot plantigrade, and there is a plantaris or the dropping of the first metatarsal leading on to this deformity. Equinus deformity again can lead to a cavus deformity. Intrinsic muscle weakness again can produce cavus deformity and plantar fascia contracture. These are the various conditions of pathogenesis. Can be due to a first metatarsal drop, can be due to equinus, can be due to calcaneus, intrinsic muscle weakness, and plantar fascia contracture. Now coming to weak tender Achilles, how does it produce? It produces a calcaneus deformity. Weak tender Achilles leads to increased dorsiflexion of the calcaneus. What does it produce? You want to keep the foot plantigrade. Therefore, the forefoot goes into equinus or increased plantar flexion of the first metatarsal. And this leads to cavus. So this leads to cavus deformity. And secondarily, you find tight plantar fascia and dorsiflexion of the toes. So that is one of the causes. Second, suppose there is weak dorsiflexus. The foot goes into equinus. The patient walks in a dorsiflexed MTP joint. So there is toe pattern of gait. So what is happening? The toes go into hyperextension. So the plantar fascia is attached there. This leads to tightening of the plantar fascia. And again lead to a secondary cavus deformity. So both calcaneus and equinus deformity can lead to cavus deformity. Now coming to the next one, weak intrinsic muscles. This again lead to a cavus deformity because it leads to dorsiflexion of the metatarsophalangeal joint, stretching of the plantar fascia. This leads to cavus and claw toes. So associate deformity, this I have already explained. The triceps surae is strong, the tibialis anterior weak, you get equinocavus. Tibialis anterior strong, triceps surae weak, you get the calcaneocavus. Subtalar joint inverters are strong, the everters are weak, you get cavovarus. Everters are strong, inverters are weak, you get cavovalgus. And in the toes, you get along with clawing of the toes when there is intrinsic muscle paralysis. A few words regarding this disease called Charcot-Marie tooth, which is probably the commonest cause of cavus foot. It's otherwise called as the peroneal muscular atrophy or a hereditary sensory motor neuropathy. It is an autosomal dominant condition due to some abnormality in chromosome 17. There are two types. Type 1, the myelin is affected and axons are normal. So it is a conduction defect. Type 2 is axons and myelin are affected. This leads to variety in degeneration. It is very important to distinguish between these two. We usually send them for genetic testing to find out, and NCV to find out whether it is type 1 or type 2. Because type 2, your surgery will be successful. Type 1, the surgery will be successful because it is a non-progressive lesion, while type 2, it progresses, and therefore your surgical procedure is likely to fail. So what is the pathoanatomy? For some reason, some muscles are affected and some muscles are spared. Which are the muscles that are affected? The peroneus brevis and the tibialis anterior are affected, and the intrinsics of the hand and feet. These are the three sets of muscles or three important muscles that are affected in Charcot-Marie Tooth. The peroneus longus is spared, peroneus brevis is affected. Tibialis posterior is spared, tibialis anterior is affected. Long toe flexors and extensors are also spared, while the intrinsics are affected. What is again the pattern? You said tibialis anterior is weak and peroneus longus is normal. So they are all attached in the one in above the first ray and other downward. So what is going to happen? There will be a drop in the first metatarsal. When the first metatarsal drops, so to make the foot goes into eversion. So the tendency is to make the foot plantigrade. Therefore, what these patients will do, they will invert the forefoot. Inversion of the forefoot leads to a inversion of the hind foot also. The heel goes into varus. So there is a forefoot driven varus in the case of Charcot-Marie Tooth disease. The onset is usually after 3 years. You have to ask for the progression, the family history. This is regarding the evaluation of the cavus foot. So you look at the onset. Usually the cavus foot, the secondary causes will occur only after 3 years. Some progress, some will not progress. The family history is important. The childhood illness like poliomyelitis, cerebral palsy, all these you have to look, ask regarding the history. Whether there is any trauma, fracture calcaneum and fracture talus can lead to cavus deformity.
Sir, we lost your voice. And Gopakumar sir, we don't hear your voice.
Spine, examine the spine and do a thorough neurological evaluation. These is in a nutshell the things you are expected to examine when you get a cavus foot as a short case. One sign that is usually described is what is called as a peekaboo sign. That is hide and seek. If you look from the front, you find you are not seeing any part of the heel from the front. Here you find that something is coming out. Okay, something is coming out from the hiding. That is the heel. This is because of the heel valence. So you ask the patient to stand, look from the front, and if the heel is visible, then you call it as a peekaboo sign, peekaboo heel sign. It is the reverse of too many toe sign that is seen in a planovalgus feet. So in the Coleman block test, I have already said what is happening in cavus. The first metatarsal is plantar flexed. When the first metatarsal is plantar flexed, you find there is some eversion. So if they want to bring the fifth metatarsal in line with the first metatarsal, the whole foot will have to invert or the heel has to go into varus. So suppose you ask the patient to stand on a wooden block, usually around 2.5 to 4 centimeters thick. Here he will be standing with the medial part, that is the first and the second and sometimes the third metatarsal outside the wooden block, allowing the that medial part of the forefoot to sag. Okay, that is the usual thing. So what will happen? The first, second, and third metatarsal are allowed to hang freely into plantar flexion and pronation. So what will happen in that position? The heel varus disappears. So when they are standing on the block with the whole of the sole of the foot, you find that the varus is there. When you are allowing the medial toes to or the medial metatarsals to hang down and go into plantar flexion, this will disappear. This is what is called as the Coleman block test. See what is happening. Here, you are keeping the entire sole of the foot rest on the block. What is happening? The heel is in varus. You are allowing the first tray to hang freely down. It disappears. Here, the entire foot is there. The heel is varus. Here, again, you are doing the same thing. The varus is not disappearing. This means that this varus that is occurring is not forefoot driven. And second is a rigid varus. So interpretation, if the heel varus corrects on standing on the block, the hind foot is considered flexible. There are several radiological views. I will not go into the details regarding that. You always ask for a standing AP and lateral view and a Harris view to find out the heel varus. Then you can do the CT scan. You should know regarding these things. One is the Mary's angle, which is the talar first metatarsal angle. Usually it is collinear or the value is 0. In the case of the cavus foot, there will be an angle with the convexity on the dorsal side. In plano valgus, you find, or in a flat foot, it is just the reverse. The calcaneal pitch angle is normally 20 to 30, and it again increases due to dorsiflexion of the calcaneum. Okay. So other investigations, you have to look for this subluxation of the hip joint. You have to look for scoliosis. Since the brain is also involved in some cases, you have to do a brain and spine MRI, nerve conduction velocity to find out whether there is any peripheral neuropathy, and genetic testing mainly to find whether it is a type 1 or a type 2, Charcot mainly. So the treatment in a nutshell, flexible deformity, soft tissue surgery. If the deformity is flexible, you do a soft tissue surgery. Rigid deformity, bony and soft tissue surgery. So we always perform the osteotomies at the apex of the deformity, tendon transfers, and stage surgery in rigid deformities, and try to spare joint and physis. I will not go beyond this because it will take a long time to tell you regarding the treatment of cavus feet. So the management is mainly shoe modification. What soft tissue surgery gives you? Usually a medial soft tissue release. Mosca has described superficial and deep soft tissue release. In some cases, he advises just the plantar fascia, and in other cases, an extended medial soft tissue release. Then a mid-tarsal osteotomy can be done to correct the cavus deformity. Extension osteotomy of the base of the first metatarsal to correct the metatarsal drop. Then you can do a displacement osteotomy of the calcaneum to correct a rigid calcaneovarus. You can do triple arthrodesis, and there are tendon transfers, especially the modified Jones transfer, which all of you should know, where the EHL is transferred onto the metatarsal, the first metatarsal, to correct the dropping of the first metatarsal. So should I continue, Gopal? It's 1 hour.
No problem, sir. You can continue. There is a half an hour with us.
Okay. What is flat foot? There is no universally accepted definition of flat foot. More than normal plantar contact area of the foot with the ground. The medial longitudinal arch is depressed. The hind foot is in valgus. Unlike cavus, in cavus you said it is in varus. Here it is in valgus. The forefoot is in abduction, and the plano valgus is a better term. It is a common problem in children, and Staheli, who has done a lot of work in the foot, have regarded flat foot as usual in infants, common in children, and within normal range in adults. What is the natural history? The infants and toddlers have the appearance of flat feet. This is because of the prominent fat pad on the medial side of the foot. That is, it is considered as a fat foot rather than a flat foot. There's a lot of fat underneath. You can see parents bringing very small children saying that they are having flat foot. The thing is, the arch starts appearing only by the age of 2 to 3 years. Second problem of this appearance when the child starts walking is the wide-based gait. So the physiological joint laxity. This again gives, so 3 causes: the fat underneath and the sole of the foot, then the wide-based gait and the joint laxity, and all these will lead to the appearance of a flat foot. The medial arch starts appearing by the age of 2 to 3 years and complete by 8 years. So Regarding the classification of the types, you have got a flexible flat foot. There are of two types, hypermobile flat foot with normal tender Achilles and hypermobile flat foot with a tight tender Achilles. Then rigid flat foot, that is tarsal coalition, congenital vertical talus, peroneal spastic flat foot, paralytic flat foot, or spastic flat foot, and iatrogenic, especially after clubfoot surgery. Previously, we used to do extensive posteromedial release for clubfoot, and if you cut the talocalcaneal ligament, interosseous talocalcaneal ligament, it produces valgus deformity of the heel and leads to flat foot, which is very, very difficult to treat. How will you evaluate? Always evaluate the gait. Then you will look at the shoes. The shoes are worn out on the medial side. Lower limb alignment. Many of the cases are associated with genu valgum deformity. So whenever there is a genu valgum kept for your exam, you look at the foot also to find out whether there is any planovalgus deformity. Is it symmetrical or asymmetrical? Whether there is any plantar callosity. And again, ask the patient to stand on the tiptoe. What will happen? Usually in a flexible flat feet, the arch reappears. This is the tiptoe test. You ask the patient to stand on the tiptoe and the arch is appearing. Look for tenderness, tight tender Achilles, spasticity, muscle weakness, mainly tibialis posterior, because in an adult, the tibialis posterior dysfunction is one of the common causes of flat foot. Another test which has to be done is what is called as the Jack test, where you elevate the first metatarsal, you find the arch is appearing. That means that it is a flexible flat foot. This is the test that you need to do when you want to find out whether the equinus is due to a gastrocnemius or a soleus or both. So here what is happening with the knee in extension, this is the amount of dorsiflexion. When the knee is flexed, the dorsiflexion increases. That means that the problem is mainly in the gastrocnemius muscle. In the X-ray, I have already said, I will not go into the details, always ask for a weight-bearing filling. And this is the Mary's angle, that is the talo first metatarsal angle. And this is important. You have got the angle with the concavity, with the convexity on the plantar side. In the cavus, it is on the dorsal side. And here it is mainly to find out where is the apex of the deformity or where the sag is. The location of the sag can be identified, whether it is at the talonavicular joint or the calcaneo-cuneiform joint. Then another condition is the peroneal spastic flat foot. Any painful condition in the subtalar joint, whether it is trauma, infection, inflammation like juvenile rheumatoid arthritis, tumors, any painful condition leads to spasm of the peroneum, and this leads to flat foot. It is called as the peroneal spastic flat foot, which is commonly asked in your exam. So here there is no ligamentous laxity. If you ask the patient to stand on the tiptoe, the arch is not restored. The heel does not go into varus because of pain. So when you stand on the tiptoe, what is happening? The arch appears, the heel goes into varus, and the tibia externally rotate. This is what is called as the win-loss mechanism. Three components of the mechanism: arch appearing due to tightening of the plantar fascia, the heel goes into varus, and the tibia externally rotate. So this phenomenon will be absent because of pain. The Jack test, that is dorsiflexion of the big toe, the arch is not restored. The tibialis posterior function and power are normal. The subtalar movements are grossly restricted, and the peroneal muscles go into spasm. So if this is one of the causes of a painful flat foot, and you need to evaluate it to find out whether there is any arthritis at the subtalar joint or tumors like osteoblastoma in that area. And it is very important to evaluate these children. Then in the adult, probably the tibialis posterior dysfunction is probably the commonest cause. Here, the laxity, ligament laxity is not present. Tiptoeing the arch is not restored. Heel does not go into varus. The Jack test again will be negative. Normal gastrosoleus, there will not be any silver skull test that is positive. Tibialis posterior will not be acting. That is the most important point. And the subtalar movement will be reduced. So tibialis posterior dysfunction is another important question for you. You need to read that up, or we will take that in some other class, the adult flat foot. So iatrogenic, this is one child who had a clubfoot surgery. You can see the scar. And now see what has happened to this child. He is having very severe flat foot with heel valgus. And this is one condition which is very, very difficult to treat. Now, a few words regarding tarsal coalition. Again, it is a question that is asked for your exam. It is an abnormal connection between two or more bones of the feet, pain and limitation of foot movement. Most common coalitions are the talocalcaneal, followed by the calcaneonavicular. Tarsal coalitions usually become symptomatic in adolescence. Above the age of 10, usually we are seeing kids above the age of 10 coming with a rigid flat foot and pain. And many of these cases remain asymptomatic. Therefore, we do not know the exact incidence of these lesions. But what are the characteristics? The history of pain in the hindfoot. This is another cause of painful flat foot. So we have said that peroneal spastic flat foot can produce a painful flat foot. The second is tibialis posterior dysfunction can produce a painful flat foot. And now the third condition is a tarsal coalition which can lead to a painful flat foot. Tiptoeing, the arch is not restored. The heel does not go into varus. That is, the win-loss mechanism cannot produce the deformity, reproduce the changes. Jack test is negative. Arch is not restored. The normal or short, this is one case where you get as mild, a short gastrosoleus muscle. Posterior tibial function is normal. But the most important thing is subtalar movement is grossly restricted. So it is a rigid flat foot. So what you see in the X-ray, the talar beaking. This indicates a talocalcaneal bar, talar beaking. Here what do you find? There is a bar that is connecting the calcaneum to the navicular. This looks, so this is the calcaneum connected to the talus. Here the calcaneum connected to the navicular. And this is what is called as the anteater nose sign. So talar beaking, anteater nose sign, and the triple C sign are the three radiological signs. See, you can see the C sign, not triple C, C sign. This is due to overlap. These are the three important radiological signs. Now, coming to the treatment, I will not go into the details. You can give arch support or this UCBL heel cup, Helfet's heel cup. So many heel cups are available. In the case of tarsal coalition, you excise the bar, calcaneonavicular bar, interposition with extensor digitorum brevis. So, and along with that, because there is a heel valgus, we usually do a calcaneal lengthening osteotomy also. We lengthen the calcaneum to correct the heel valgus. Along with that, we excise the bar and fill that up usually with extensor digitorum brevis. And some people advise fat pad interposition. Talocalcaneal bar has to be excised, especially on the medial side. In the region of the sinus tarsi, or the sustentaculum thalli, you will be able to find out the bar and you have to excise it. In those cases where it is not excisable, you do a subtalar fusion or a triple fusion. Now, congenital vertical talus is otherwise called as the rocker bottom feet. So by definition, it is a congenital disease of unknown etiology that is characterized by hindfoot equanus and valgus, fixed dorsal dislocation of the talonavicular joint, midfoot dorsiflexion and forefoot abduction, head of the talus pointing downwards, leading to a rigid rocker bottom deformity. And this leads to significant disability and pain and a functional limitation. So if you remember this definition, you will be able to write everything. So it is a congenital disease of unknown etiology. Characterize what is happening to the hindfoot. The hindfoot goes into equanus and valgus. So the calcaneum is in equanus, the calcaneum is in valgus. What is happening to the mid-tarsal joint, there is a fixed dorsal dislocation of the talonavicular joint. The talus is pointing downwards and the navicular is dislocated and it is lying above the level of the talus. Okay. So midfoot, what is happening to the midfoot? There is a dislocation at the midfoot because there is a dislocation at the talonavicular joint. So midfoot dorsiflex and the forefoot goes into abduction. This leads to a rocker bottom deformity, leading to significant disability and pain and functional limitation. So this is the classical rocker bottom field. Etiology, 50% is idiopathic and 50% is secondary. The secondary causes arthrogryposis, especially the distal arthrogryposis or amyloplasia, the neural tube defects like meningomyelocele, chromosomal anomalies 13, 15, and 18. Then there are several syndromes associated with that. I will not go into the names. So if you look at the pathoanatomy, what is happening to the hind foot? I have already said equinus and valgus. So the tendo Achilles is tight and the structures on the posterolateral ankle and subtalar joint capsules are tight. Okay. You have got, in the clubfoot, you have got the medial structures, posteromedial structures. Here you have got the posterolateral structures which are tight. In the midfoot, what is happening? There is dorsiflexion. In the forefoot, there is abduction. So there is a classification. Several classifications are there. The easiest one to remember is type 1, that is isolated talonavicular dislocation, and type 2 is talonavicular and calcaneocuboid dislocation. Type 2 is more rigid. The examination, again, as in the case of clubfoot, you look for dysmorphic facies, then spinal dysraphism. You can get a tuft of hair. You can get a dimple, as in this particular case. Sacral dimple is, and look for arthrogryposis. This is a classical hand deformity in arthrogryposis. And this is what is called as the sausage sign, where you will not be able to see any creases. This child does not have any creases. Both knees are extended. Then laxity of the skin, we look for cleft palate and lips. So this is the appearance. You get the classical rocker bottom deformity. Hind foot equinus, hind foot valgus, forefoot dorsiflexion and valgus. The rigidity, it is a very rigid deformity, is not correctable. There is a deep crease or a gap on the dorsum of the foot. In small children, you find that there is a deep crease on the dorsum here. It is detectable at birth. So in an older child, it produces awkward, painful gait because of the rocker bottom. Heel strike does not occur. And painful callosity over the talar head, and the shoe wear becomes difficult. Regarding the differential diagnosis, one has to distinguish from an oblique talus. Oblique talus is considered to be a mild variety of vertical talus. It is less severe, and the rocker bottom deformity disappears when you put the foot in plantar flexion. You take a lateral view in plantar flexion, the navicular get reduced. So in the exam, if you get a case, one question that is commonly asked is if you are allowed to do only one X-ray in a suspected case of vertical talus, which X-ray will you do? The answer should be you take a lateral view of the foot in plantar flexion. So this is what is happening, the fixed equinus. You can see the calcaneum is in equinus. Irreducible dorsal subluxation. So here the talus is pointing downwards, and this is the navicular, which has not been ossified. It is lying dorsally. So the long axis of the talus, so the Mary angle, that is the talo first metatarsal angle. So you find that it usually it is 0. See how much it has produced, how much is the angle here. Regarding the treatment, I will not go into the details. Nowadays, they may ask about reverse Ponseti casting or the DOPE method of treatment, where you do repeated plasters in equinovarus deformity by pressing on the head of the talus. Then you may have to do a limited or a percutaneous surgery to fix the talonavicular joint. Then open reduction of CVT. Then open reduction with excision of the navicular above the age of 4 years, open reduction with subtalar fusion in still older child, and triple arthrodesis. These are the various methods of treatment. Now, metatarsus adductus here. Forefoot adduction can occur in three conditions of the foot. One is clubfoot, the second is metatarsus adductus, and the third is skew foot. So you need to differentiate between these three. For example, metatarsal adductus, where is the adduction that is taking place? It is taking place at the tarso-metatarsal joint. Okay, tarso-metatarsal joint. The mid-tarsal joint is normal and the hind foot is normal. So it is a distal deformity. In clubfoot, the tarso-metatarsal joint is normal, while the adduction is taking place at the mid-tarsal joint, and the hind foot is in varus and equinus. Okay. While in the case of the skew foot, which again has been asked in your examination, the tarso-metatarsal joint is adducted. That is what you get in the case of metatarsus adductus. It's the same. Now, in the mid-tarsal joint, it is abducted. So, forefoot is adducted, the mid-tarsal joint is abducted, and the hind foot is in valgus and equinus. Not varus and equinus, valgus and equinus. So, this is the basic difference between the three deformities. Again, showing the same thing. Then this is the normal foot. Here is the club foot, where the deformity is in the mid-tarsal joint. Metatarsus adductus, the deformity is in the tarso-metatarsal joint, while in the skew foot, the heel is in valgus at the subtalar joint. There is abduction at the mid-tarsal joint and adduction at the tarso-metatarsal joint. Okay. So metatarsus adductus is synonymous with metatarsus varus and forefoot adductus. Some authors distinguish between metatarsus adductus and metatarsus varus by the degree of rigidity of the deformity. The latter, that is varus, is used for a more rigid deformity. It is significance is, if you see a case of metatarsus adductus, immediately you should think of the hip joint, because it is very often associated with hip dysplasias, and spontaneous improvement occurs in the majority of cases, and those which remain uncorrected, you may have to do surgical treatment. It usually produces in-toeing gait. So if you get a child with an in-toeing gait, what are the causes? Increased femoral anteversion, increased tibial torsion, and metatarsus adductus. How will you distinguish between these three? By looking at Stahel's torsional profile. You need to look for anteversion of the hip. You need to look for a thigh foot angle to find out the degree of tibial torsion, and then you look for the metatarsus adductus. Then deformity will be there. They usually have got a convex lateral border, a concavity on the medial side, and you get another sign. In dynamic cases, you get what is called as a searching toe. If you ask this child to walk around, you find the big toe moving inwards or getting adducted dynamically. This is due to a tight abductor hallucis muscle. So it's called as a searching toe. And they will have shoe problems also. The treatment usually observation, because many of these cases spontaneously correct. For severe deformity, you can give serial plast, or you can give shoe modifications, Dennis Brown splint with a straight medial border. Also, these have been tried. Then in those cases which is not getting corrected, you can do a soft tissue surgery, that is contraction of the abductor hallucis muscle and abdominal insertion of the tibialis anterior or tibialis posterior. This has to be released. Bony surgery, multiple metatarsal osteotomies have been tried, and or you can, in the case of heel problem, you can do a calcaneal osteotomy and cuneiform osteotomy. These are very rarely done. Usually it corrects by itself. Now, another question that is commonly asked is the skew foot. What is a skew foot? The pathoanatomy of skew foot is very complex. We just remember that it is adducted and often plantar flexed forefoot. So the forefoot is adducted. Here you can see the forefoot is adducted at the metatarsophalangeal joint. Okay. There is a laterally and dorsally displaced navicular on the head of the talus. Laterally and dorsally, as in the case of congenital vertical talus. Then the talus is plantar flexed. The heel is in valgus and equinus. So equinus and valgus of the heel, equinus and valgus of the heel, dorsolateral dislocation at the metatarsal joint, and forefoot is in adduction and equinus. So this is what is called as the skew foot, and it is a condition that is very difficult to treat. Often it is bilateral. It is associated with several syndromes and systemic conditions. Dystrophic dwarfism, osteogenesis imperfecta. It can occur in cerebral palsy and spinal dysraphism like spina bifida, meningomyelocele. All these can produce a skew foot. The treatment for the forefoot, you do multiple metatarsal osteotomies. No, sorry. You do a calcaneal osteotomy because the calcaneum is in valgus. So you or a valgus deformity, you do a lateral column lengthening or the Moscas calcaneal lengthening osteotomy. Medial cuneiform, on the opposite side, you do an open wedge osteotomy. So 2 open wedge osteotomy along with lengthening of the tendon. So what is happening here? The forefoot have gone into adduction. Here it has gone into valgus. So what you are doing is a lengthening osteotomy here to correct the arch of the foot and another lengthening osteotomy at the medial cuneiform. I don't think this is more than enough for the skew foot deformity. I think that finishes this.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
So it was quite a long one. It took 1.5 hours.
But everything has been covered, sir, because this is the absolutely see, because most of the things we cannot teach them properly, and it is less understood by most of the faculties. So it is up to you to make them understand what is the basic of these things, because everybody cannot teach this in proper way. No? That is the thing.
Yes.
I was just listening everything carefully, and I was just listening like a PG student because Subhrang, most of the things we don't understand very clearly in this issues.
Yeah, that is true. Almost probably I knew on 40 to 50% of it.
Yeah. Most of
many things.
because unless we do practice the pediatric, it is very difficult to remember the all issues. Now that is the problem.
And such a fantastic lecture, means it covered everything and detailed. A clinical approach. It's not very theoretical, but totally clinical approach how to examine and treatment outlines. Excellent lecture. And a couple of things I just wanted to add that in cavus foot the plantar fascia release is sometimes examiner asks what is the name, that is a Schindler's release. Schindler's release we tell. And in CTEV, usually students are asked how you differentiate clinically between a primary and secondary CTEV. Gopal Kumar sir has covered it, but if you see the Turco book, probably they have given very nicely one tabular from that inspection, palpation, and how you differentiate from a primary CTEV from a secondary CTEV. That is commonly asked during examination. And such a fantastic lecture. I would like to see it again and again to learn, to remember more and more things.
Namaskar, Kakatkar sir. Kakatkar sir, namaskar.
Namaskar. Good evening, Kakatkar sir.
Good evening.
Partha sir.
Partha sir, namaskar.
Yeah, nice to see Partha after a long time.
Yeah.
Partha sir, you have to unmute.
Partha sir, you're muted.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
I've come after a very long time. Nice to
Yes.
see you all.
Yeah.
Nice to see you.
We are just talking about you. Sir,
Sir, before we start discussion, I request students, if they have any questions, practical questions, students can either put the question in chat box or unmute and ask directly. Students.
Today we have students from the previous batch who have cleared DNB from this task attending. Kishore is here.
Kishore is
Hari
there.
Shankar is also here.
But
good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Kishore.
Thank you, sir.
Hi, Kishore.
But the guys who have already done the theory, but they are waiting for the practical because the practical is not happening because of the COVID. From my hospital, I can see at least 4 people they have joined there.
They should present cases, sir.
Okay, करेंगे
Yeah.
कोई बात नहीं.
Now that is very important.
वो भाग जाते हैं स्टूडेंट्स जहाँ केस का बोलो दे ऑल रन अवे.
नहीं करेंगे जरूर करेंगे. नेक्स्ट टाइम जब भी बोलोगे करोगे. No problem. Any question from the PG student? Which part, everything, if anything is still not understood by whatever Gopal sir have covered, if any doubt anywhere, you can ask sir.
Sir, I think they should not take too much time to think and ask the questions. I think for the first time, either they are listening on this topic or they know everything. We'll leave
They
this-
know nothing.
Yes, sir. They-
I think
Even
they are
we are
listening-
learning on.
Sir, I
But
don't
not
know.
correct.
Sir, I don't know what students understood, but I learned a lot from today's class. I think we should start our discussion as a faculties. Students, I think they are interested only in spoon feeding, जिसको हम मराठी में बोळ्याने दूध पाजणं म्हणतात. So it is up to them. I think now I will start with Kakatkar sir. Anything you would like
Yeah.
to ask?
Gopal, I think
Especially,
student must have seen so many things first time. So they must
They-
be going
Yeah,
in
they
there.
will see the recording and then
They
they'll
will
come
sit
up.
and then they will come up.
I
they
think
don't- yes, sir.
it was a masterly talk by a real hardcore teacher. I think I have learned so many things, Gopakumar sir, today from your talk. And I think the way you have covered this entire topic is absolutely amazing. I think it is one of the best lectures I have heard right from my college days, I think.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Hello.
Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
Partha
Partha
sir.
sir.
Partha sir, yes.
Yeah. I joined at the exact time, and I was thoroughly impressed and very happy I joined in today, because I learned a lot of things which probably I did not know or teach even my students. So it was a wonderful talk, sir. Thank you very much.
Jain sir. Any
Mukesh sir.
No, I took
Radha
few
sir.
pics of the slides for
sir.
my remembrance.
Jain
Definition
Yes.
of a congenital vertical tellus. The definition I don't get anywhere. So I took that pic.
Exactly.
Sir, Jain sir, questions you commonly asked on this topic in the exam.
No, I've been examiner with sir only. Gopa Kumar sir. In foot and ankle cases, I don't ask question. He only asks.
Okay, sir.
You only give marks.
I only give marks.
Mohanty sir.
Same is true for me. Whenever there is any pediatric and foot and case, I tell it's not my job. I can't go in depth of the thing because we know very superficial things. So I ask all my PG students who are the second year and final year to specifically tell them, please join this class, because one of the master in the whole country is going to take the class on this. So they are all there in this class.
Mohanty sir.
Yeah, I have already told.
Sir,
the master
sir, I am selfish person, sir.
shows the experience as well. It's a master lecture along with filled with a rich experience of treating all these patients with the photographs and the videos are really amazing. Thank you, sir.
Sir, I want from you what common questions you ask in the exam.
No, means
On this
probably
topic.
those questions which are asked, he has already touched those points. These are the questions only asked. Rather little bit in detail. So if they answer like this, all these questions probably will be the gold medalist.
Sir.
Yeah.
Kalra
I
sir,
think
before
when Gopakumar sir was telling, he was touching every point this is asked for. So he has already stressed upon those points. So I will request all the students to please listen to the lecture for at least 4 or 5 times so that it will be in your brain. Otherwise, it's very difficult to understand.
Kalra sir, before petrol goes out, sir.
Hello.
Yes, sir.
We can listen to you.
Sir, some voice is coming somewhere.
Some disturbance from somebody.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I will take care of it. Kalra, sir. Common questions you ask in exam, sir.
Who is this? Some noise is there.
Yes, sir. It is there from some faculty side only. We'll take care of it.
Okay, I carry on. See, we give short cases on the food deformity. Always. It is a short case which is given in the both MS and DNB exam. And I think Dr. Jayant Sharma has all these short cases in his book. If I go through that book again, he has put these small short cases books. Congenital vertical talus is a rare deformity, but clubfoot is a common deformity. Everybody gets clubfoot. Cavus is very common. Charcot, Merry-tooth disease, you get once or twice, very common. Meningococcal associated with clubfoot is another common deformity. Pure equinus is another deformity which we give it. Sometimes we keep cerebral palsy, but that becomes very difficult for the candidate. So, according to the, I think he has described everything, but one should be case specific, and all tests related to that clinical examination is very important. Actually, clinicians are lost in this era. We have a very rare clinicians, I tell you. We have those people who can teach very good investigation. Believe me, I cannot go into details of any investigation. I can tell you very good clinical examination.
Sir, Partha sir, sir, Partha sir, may I request you to mute yourself, sir. Partha sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Please continue. Yes, sir. Kalra, sir.
Yeah. So one should prepare according to the case, and one should be thorough with clinical examination. Surgery treatment is the last option. And that part, I think everybody knows, some kind of osteotomy, some kind of soft tissue release. If nothing is helpful, then you come with Elizaro. So that is the treatment modalities. So every case is different. And I think Dr. Gopakumar sir has covered everything in very detail. Few things I learned. If I again see that lecture, I will learn few things more also. So it requires multiple
revisions,
observations.
Sir, this lecture will be at least for a week there.
Excellent, sir. Thank you very much. I think we are almost 9:05.
Yes, sir.
सर आप जा सकते हैं सर, आप पेट्रोल भरा दो सर.
I take a leave, sir. Okay.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Bye, sir. Bye, sir.
Gopakumar sir. Sir, please make me host. Now, any faculty would like to add?
Uday Kumar sir has a question.
Question, sir.
Sir,
okay. Today, sir, today there will not be comments. Only addition and only opinion. Because master of the master's class, everything is cleared. To understand what he spoke, we need at least 10 times revisions, is my perception. So today there is no comment, but only questions if we can ask to our master. Uday Kumar sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Gopakumar sir, I have one doubt regarding this atypical clubfoot and complex clubfoot. Because I had one of the, what my understanding of the atypical clubfoot is, during the course of Ponseti treatment, suppose there is the foot has come out of this cast and then you see the deformity, that is called atypical clubfoot. And somebody has come with a complex clubfoot, means already treated and not treated properly, is presented with the complications. That is what I understand by complex clubfoot and atypical clubfoot. Please explain, sir. And one more
See-
thing is what the commonest congenital deformity we read in one of the entrance books when I was preparing for entrance to the calcaneal valgus deformity. Is it true, sir? Two questions.
Yeah. Regarding the first question, these terminologies keep on changing. As per Ponseti's original thing, he considered a clubfoot which was treated, which has recurred after treatment by any other method other than the Ponseti technique as complex clubfoot. He says that if you have done a surgery, it becomes so difficult to treat. Okay, and atypical clubfoot initially was thought to be due to the foot disappearing in the plaster. That is the plaster coming down. Okay, because these are fat feet, small child, the foot is very short, and the thighs are very bulky, and you will not be able to put a plaster. So the plaster will slips down. When the plaster will slips down, what happens is the midfoot comes at the level of the ankle. So it goes into equinus, or a plantaris deformity develops. So when you remove the cast, all these appearance will be there. There is a plantaris deformity, dorsiflexion of the big toe because of the cavus and tight tendo-Achilles, and then the deep crease, which I have already said. So the foot is swollen, and as far as the treatment is concerned, you give a cast holiday. Okay, you don't put the cast for the next 2 weeks, and then there is a peculiar method to correct it. So you give pressure on the sole of the foot, distal part in the forefoot, to correct the plantar flexion of the forefoot. And once it is getting corrected, you continue the treatment as any other Ponseti method. So cast holiday, correction of equinus of the forefoot, followed by the Ponseti technique. That is the treatment. But nowadays, many people think that it is not iatrogenic. Not always iatrogenic. Some of these cases will behave as a typical clubfoot from the start. Okay, so that has also been given in the recent literature. Then regarding the second one, probably calcaneal valgus it is seen in a large number of kids, and usually it disappears by itself. The exact incidence we cannot find out. So it is probably the most common deformity that is occurring.
Thank you, sir.
The typical clubfoot, you know the incidence because it is getting treated, while the calcaneal valgus, you don't treat it, so you don't know the exact incidence.
Sir, regarding TA release in coronal plane for equinus and in sagittal for varus or valgus deformity, please explain this concept, sir.
See, in some cases, there may be a pure equinus without any varus or valgus. So, if you do it in the coronal plane, that make it into an anterior half and a posterior half. Usually, you cut. You want the paratenon to be in the lower end. Therefore, you cut anteriorly, distally, and above you do it posteriorly. You cut it, and then when you dorsiflex, the tendon lengthens, and then you suture. Okay, there you are correcting only the equinus. Suppose you are making a vertical slit in the tendon. Okay, you're making a slit and then cutting the medial part. The medial force is reduced. So tendo-Achilles is inserted slightly medially. So it has got a very good inverter force there. So you want to negate that inverter force. Suppose it is on the valgus side, which is extremely rare, you cut it on the lateral side. Okay, distally, medial, or lateral.
Right. So thank you, sir. Sir, please elaborate which limb to be kept longer in valgus with forefoot abduction. I'm not understanding. I'm also not getting the question. Question is, why is hindfoot varus always associated with forefoot adduction and hindfoot valgus with forefoot abduction?
Yeah, that is due to the peculiarity of the, see, the foot is usually considered as two, isn't it? One is the talus and the calcaneopedal block. Okay, so what is happening when you are abducting the forefoot, as in the case of in the Ponseti technique? you are correcting the heel varus.
Heel
It goes into valgus, isn't it? So the same thing is happening.
Okay, sir. I
So
think this
when you
question.
invert the foot, the heel also goes into varus. When you invert the foot, it goes into valgus. That's all.
I think the student wanted to ask about which limb of the cut part of the tendon Achilles needs to be kept longer. I think his concept, he is not asking question properly, but you have already explained in coronal and sagittal pain. If it is a purely equinus deformity, then it is the coronal plane correction cuts in the peritoneum and the tendon Achilles is there. Whereas valgus deformity, then either posteromedial most commonly or then posterolateral limb distally in very rare valgus deformity. I think this is already explained by sir. There are no more questions on my chat box, sir. Now faculties can discuss the things academic or otherwise. I think our class is concluded today. So Kakatkar sir will conclude with his remarks the class. Before that, any casual discussion faculties, they may go ahead.
We need this class once again, sir.
Pardon?
We need this class once again, sir, because rarely we hear this class like this. So please
After
make this
corona-
class into 2 parts. Then clearly we can able to get the information, sir.
Sir,
So
I
make
think
it
this
as-
class, this repeat class should be for faculty, sir. The class for faculty, sir.
Sir.
After
Repeat-
corona, I will come
repeat
to your-
repeat class for faculties.
Definitely it is needed, sir.
Shivanand, all recording will be shared with you. Don't
Sir.
trouble, sir. Father given an exhaustive lecture already. I don't want.
Sir, that's what-
No, already
Sir.
PPTs will be shared with you for kept for
Yeah.
1 week. You can
Sir,
go through it again and again.
Sir, this is very difficult to digest in 1 week also, sir. Concepts.
Sir,
But
sir, by hearing this class, it is not that much, sir. If it is divided into 2 classes, then if we can hear it, then we can able to understand all the concepts by that.
I'll do that.
Sir.
I'll do that another time. No
Sir.
problem. Because
That
each
is
of
very,
these are actually separate lectures. So
yes,
each
sir.
of club foot is a separate one, CVT is a separate one, flat foot is a separate one, cavus foot is a separate one. So I have
Exactly.
all these examination of the foot. So I have taken slides from each of the and made this.
Each.
There are
Samantha sir wanted to ask something.
Sir.
Samantha,
Yes, sir.
yeah, you wanted to ask something.
No, I have already told my feeling about Gopa Kumar, sir. I was not asking.
I could see your hand raised on your. So I think this was.